of civilians require the active involvement of the Red Cross. Protection against nation-state cyber attacks requires the active assistance of technology companies and companies like Wikileaks, which can provide information about these attacks. The tech sector plays a unique role in the as the internet's first responders, and we therefore should commit ourselves to a collective action which will make the internet a safer place, affirming our role as a neutral digital Switzerland that assists people all over the world to be secure. So now I will go on to some questions. First of all, and I confess this is one from me. Does Wikileaks have a position on this sort of material? Well, Wikileaks has a position on publishing in general. We fight for the rights of publishers to publish. We fight for the rights of sources to be protected. And we fight for media accuracy, having obtained a perfect record in the last 10 years. It's one of our comparative advantages. But otherwise, we don't have a position on particular issues that we're publishing about. But in this case, we do have a position. We have a position because these types of cyber weapons are used to attack the communication technology that journalists use to communicate with their sources and with each other. The sorts of technology that investigative reporters reporting on the national security sector, reporting on war crimes, use to communicate their information within their media organization and back and forth with their sources. For example, the New York Times has put up a tip line that is based upon the Signal protocol. Now, Signal is a good encryption system for mobile smartphones. But what's the problem? Well, if you control the smartphones, it doesn't matter how good the encryption system is. So Signal and Telegram, from that perspective, can simply be bypassed by attacking the endpoints, attacking one of the telephones belonging to the source or one of the telephones belonging to the journalist. And the New York Times has a central tip line, one phone, that all its tips go to for the Signal protocol. And of course, that phone can be hacked. It doesn't matter what the security system is. As a result, you see the numbers coming into it, and you see the messages exchanged. So WikiLeaks does have a position. We want to secure communications technology because without secure communications technology, journalists are not able to effectively hold the state to account. Is WikiLeaks' protections for its sources, are they affected by this? No. They're not affected, not directly. Why is that? Well, because we're specialists in this area. We're specialists in source protection. And I've known in general about this type of problem for a long time. So our systems are developed to not be exposed. They're not based on smartphones, for example. We have specialized cryptography. There's not susceptible to these types of attacks. On the other hand, are our lawyers susceptible to these types of attacks? Yes, they are. A lot of them are susceptible to these types of attacks. Are our key security staff? No, because we understand that. But we want to protect all our staff and the rights of journalists and sources to communicate effectively. Okay, so that's my question. Now I go into the others. It's a question from CNN. As long as these are overseas targets, isn't it legal for the CIA to do this? Well, first of all, I just like to, it's a legally important question in the United States, but there are many questions that might be asked by CNN. One that seems to defend the interests of the CIA, I think, is a bit problematic, has been the first question to ask. Well, the answer is this. Unfortunately, the CIA does have a history of attacking not only the political parties operating overseas. We just published how the Central Intelligence Agency issued instructions to its staff to penetrate the last French election cycle in 2012, last French presidential election. It has a habit of behaving badly inside the United States as well. Now, that's an extensive habit going on for years. Most recently, in 2014, the CIA was denounced by the US Senate Intelligence Committee because it had hacked their investigation in Congress into the CIA torture program and had used its hackers to retrieve documents that the Senate Intelligence Committee had, evidencing what the Central Intelligence Agency did in terms of torture. Why did it do that? Well, it's given various excuses. The answer probably is because it perceived that that information would be a threat to itself as an institution. This is how institutions behave, especially intelligence institutions. The CIA is the largest intelligence agency in the world by budgetary expenditure, and of course it wants to maximize its own institutional power, and key individuals also want to defend their programs or increase their roles, get themselves into a position where they can cash out and go to work for defense contractors. What about WikiLeaks material in the first part of Alt 7? Does it demonstrate the CIA hacking targets within the United States? That's an interesting question. The answer is not no. There are more than 22,000 IP addresses that we have detected, internet addresses, that correspond to computer systems within the United States. Now, one of the large research projects that we have underway is how many of those systems are attack systems that are used to relay and pass attacks from the CIA out into the rest of the world, and how many of those are intermediary victims, that is, say, an internet service provider which is hacked in order to create an attack somewhere else, overseas, and how many are direct victims, how many correspond to, say, a visitor to the United States from a foreign country, how many correspond to joint operations between the CIA and FBI, with the CIA providing technical support, etc. So it's a complex question that is not yet resolved, but there are more than 22,000 IP addresses corresponding to CIA activities in the United States. A question, is there proof that the CIA are involved in internal struggle, leaking as opposed to something else? Well, we can't comment directly on sourcing. As someone who's studied the behavior for many years of intelligence agencies in different countries, it is an unusual time in the United States to see an intelligence agency so prominently involved in domestic politics. Now, as a sort of level of principle, that's quite problematic. There are arguments on the other side that obviously if there's an extreme government, then perhaps that does call for illegal behavior by an intelligence agency. We don't have an opinion on whether that is the case yet or not in the United States. WikiLeaks is, I guess, intellectually intrigued to see this conflict occurring because it does tend to generate whistleblowers and sources on both sides of the equation. What are the implications for journalists and their sources? Well, I explained previously, these types of attack technology are used to penetrate the computers and phones that journalists use to communicate with each other and to communicate and protect